Welcome to my channel. Hollywood is out of ideas. That is the consensus. That is what you hear from film critics, from gaming journalists, from every comment section on every trailer for every sequel, reboot, remake, and franchise entry that has come out in the last decade. The discourse is unanimous. The creative well is dry. The suits have won, and Risk is dead. I'm going to tell you that this is wrong. Not because the observation is wrong, the sequels are real, the reboots are real, the franchise dependency is real, but because the explanation is wrong. The entertainment industry is not suffering from a creativity deficit, it is responding, rationally and predictably, to a market structure that makes original content an economically irrational choice. There are three conditions that define that market structure. Together they form what I'm going to call the unholy trinity of the entertainment industry. Each condition is damaging on its own. Together, they produce a market unlike almost any other consumer good that exists. The trinity does not excuse every bad decision made in Hollywood or gaming or whatever medium that you consume. It explains why the pattern of decisions looks the way it does across every format, every platform, and every decade simultaneously. Three conditions. Each one is a standard economic concept. None of them are controversial in isolation. The argument is about what happens when all three operate on the same market simultaneously. Condition 1. High elasticity. Entertainment is among the most elastic consumer goods that exist. The buyer always has a substitute, the buyer can always leave. Demand collapses on bad information faster than any other market. Condition 2. The experience good. Entertainment is a product whose quality cannot be determined before consumption. You do not know if a film is good until you have watched it. You do not know if a game is fun until you have played it. The buyer and seller have asymmetric information, and the buyer cannot close that gap before committing money. Condition 3 is zero guarantee. There is no institutional mechanism that exists to certify entertainment quality before purchase. There is no building code or audited quality statement or regulatory body. The buyer enters every purchase with no protection, and the producer enters every release with zero certainty. Run all three simultaneously and the market outcomes become predictable, not because the people inside the industry are cowards or Philistines, but because the incentive structure leaves them very little room to be anything else. Let's start with elasticity because this is the condition that makes everything else worse. Price elasticity of demand measures how sharply demand falls when prices rises, or equivalently, how quickly buyers substitute away from a product when it fails to satisfy. If you have watched my last video, you are very familiar with this concept. An inelastic good is one where demand holds even when prices spike. Medicine, rent, food. People need insulin whether it costs $10 or $1,000. An elastic good is one where demand collapses the moment a substitute becomes attractive. Entertainment is perhaps the most elastic consumer goods that exist. When you buy a video game or a movie ticket, it will not expire. It will not be urgent. You can buy it on 6 months later on sale. If you do not buy it at all, there are millions of other things that you could do, or you could pirate it. This single condition creates a brutal competitive environment that many industries never have to deal with. And three mechanisms drive elasticity to its absolute extreme in entertainment specifically. Entertainment is the only consumer good where the direct competitor set is essentially unlimited. A game competes not just with other games, it competes with every other use of leisure time that has ever existed. This is the same for every other piece of entertainment. Film, television, books, social media, sleep. A game released in 2025 competes with games released in 1998 that are sitting in someone's backlog or emulator, fully paid for or free, ready to play. This is not true of any other major consumer category. If you need to replace your refrigerator, another leisure activity is not a substitute. If you need to fill a prescription, you cannot substitute a different category of medicine. The substitution set is defined and bounded. In entertainment, the substitution set is infinite and the competition never leaves the market. A bad film from 2019 does not necessarily disappear from the competitive landscape unless you're Warner Brothers. It sits on a streaming service, permanently available, permanently competing against every new release for the same leisure hour. This means that brand differentiation is not a luxury. It is the only survival mechanism available. If your product is not meaningfully distinct from the infinite field of alternatives, the buyer will choose from that field. The sequel, the franchise, the returning star, all of them are attempts to be distinct in a market where distinctness is the only thing that survives. Free to play gaming, subscription streaming, the back catalog, piracy. The effective price floor for entertainment is zero. A buyer who wants to consume entertainment without spending money has more options available to them today than at any point in the history of humanity. Netflix, Spotify, Game Pass, the library. Support your local library. The mechanisms for accessing entertainment at no marginal cost are abundant and legitimate. This creates a problem that most industries never face. Price-based competition is nearly impossible when the competition includes free. A new film releases at $15 a ticket. It competes with the streaming library that the buyer is already paying for, which they perceive as having zero marginal cost because the subscription fee is already sunk. A new game releases for $70. It competes against the backlog of 50 games the buyer owns already and has not finished, which costs them nothing at the margin. Steam sale culture is the most legible version of this dynamic. The platform has trained an entire generation of buyers to wishlist games and wait. The price will drop. It always drops. The buyer who pays full price on launch day is considered a sucker, not a customer. The entire value of day one purchasing has been systemically destroyed from the market's own pricing behavior. When you cannot compete on price because your competitive is free, the entire competitive dynamic gets forced onto the signal layer. Brand, IP, star, franchise. They are the only tools available when pricing power has been neutralized. Because substitutes are always one click away, negative information about an entertainment product travels faster and hits harder than in almost any other consumer markets. A bad review of a new washing machine may cost the manufacturer some sales. The buyer still needs a washing machine. They will buy a different one. The category survives the bad product. A bad review of a new film redirects the entire demand curve to a substitute immediately. The buyer does not need this film, they need entertainment. They will get it from something that else tonight, something that already exists, and something whose quality they already know. The category survives, but the product does not. There is no loyalty buffer. There is no switching cost. There is no lock-in. The moment the information environment turns negative, the buyer leaves and the revenue stops. This is why opening weekend is not a marketing strategy, it is a structural necessity. You need to capture revenue before the information environment turns. You need to get as many uninformed buyers as possible to commit money before word of mouth, review scores, and social media consensus make an informed decision possible. The producer has one shot at an uninformed buyer. That window is measured in days, sometimes hours. Once the market has processed the product, the window closes permanently. This is not cynicism or whatever, it is simply the rational response to a demand structure that punishes hesitation. The second leg of the Trinity is one that makes economists reach for George Akerlof. In 1970, Akerlof published a paper called The Market for Lemons. It won the Nobel the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2001. The argument is elegant and devastating. Akerlof asks, what happens to a market when buyers cannot evaluate product quality before purchase? His example was used cars. When you buy a used car, you cannot know for certain whether you are getting a reliable vehicle, a peach, or a lemon, a car with hidden defects that will reveal themselves only after you have driven it for a few weeks. The seller knows, the buyer does not. The information asymmetry is the core of the problem. Because buyers know they might get a lemon, they discount their willingness to pay. They will not pay full price for a car whose quality they cannot verify, so they offer less. But if buyers only offer lemon prices, sellers who have good cars will not sell them. The price is too low to be worth it. So, good cars leave the market. The average quality of remaining cars drops. Buyers will discount further. More good cars will leave. The market will degrade towards the bottom. The entertainment industry is the lemons market operating at global scale. Every film, every game, every album is a used car whose quality the buyer cannot verify before purchase. And the consequences are identical to what Akerlof described, just playing out in slow motion across decades of franchise dependency and IP recycling. You cannot know if a film is good until you have watched it. You cannot understand a character's morality before you have read the comic. This seems obvious when stated plainly, but the implications are not obvious. The buyer is being asked every single time to commit their money and their time that they have no reliable means of evaluating before that commitment is made. And the tools that exist to help them at all are all, in one way or another, broken. Demos exist, but they're curated. The developer selects the 30 minutes most likely to impress and presents those 30 minutes as representative of the experience. This is not lying exactly, but it is not informative either. A great demo has launched many a terrible game. Trailers exist, but are marketing. Every trailer is made by people whose job is to make the product look good as possible, regardless of what the product actually is. This makes it not a reliable quality signal. Reviews exist, but they arrive after the purchase window has closed for most buyers. By the time Metacritic has a meaningful aggregate score, the opening weekend is over. The buyer is flying blind every single time. There is a reason that nobody trusts movie trailers anymore. It is not because the people making trailers are unusually dishonest. It is because the experience goods structure creates a systemic incentive to overstate quality in marketing, and both parties know it. The seller has every incentive to make the product look as good as possible before purchase because that is the only moment when the buyer's information can be managed. Once the product is in the buyer's hands, the information management is over. The review scores are real, the word of mouth is real, and the buyer's own experience is real. The seller's ability to shape the information environment collapses the moment the product ships. So, the seller pours resources into pre-release marketing that makes the product look as good as it can possibly look. The buyer understands this and discounts accordingly. This is why review embargoes get treated as red flags. If the products were good, the seller would want reviews out as early as possible to build pre-release momentum. An embargo means that the seller does not want informed buyers before launch. The arms race before producer deception and buyer skepticism is a direct output of the experience goods structure. It was not created by bad actors, it was created by the market. The incentive to overstate quality in a market where quality is unverifiable is structural, not personal. Change the people, change the movie, and the behavior will stay the same because the incentive stays the same. The review system is retrospective. Critics and user reviews will tell you what was good. They cannot tell you what will be good. The distinction sounds trivial until you think about the timing problem. By the time reliable quality information exists in the market, by the time there are enough reviews, enough user scores, enough social media consensus to give a buyer a confident picture of the product's quality, the product's revenue window has already closed for most release formats. Theatrical films have a window measured in weeks. The first weekend is the most important. By the second weekend, word of mouth has already shaped the audience that is or is not showing up. By the third weekend, the film is done. The entire period which quality information would actually change purchasing behavior is the period before the information exists. Gaming has extended this window somewhat but introduced different problems. Algorithmic distribution on Steam means that a game that does not capture immediate attention gets buried regardless of eventual quality. The information arrives, but the discovery mechanism has already moved on. A game with great reviews 6 months after launch is not a game that will sell 6 months after launch. That is why brand recognition is worth billions of dollars. The sequel, the franchise, the returning director, the recognizable star. These are quality signals that arrive before the purchase decision rather than after it. They are the market's solution to a review system that is structurally too late to be useful at the moment of purchase. The third leg of the Trinity is the one that makes the other two unbearable for the people producing the content. In most high-stakes consumer markets, institutional mechanisms exist to certify quality before purchase. These mechanisms protect the buyer, but they also protect the producer. They provide a standard that, if met, even if it's imperfect, gives the producer reasonable confidence that the market will accept the product. Pharmaceuticals have FDA approval. The process is long and expensive and very much imperfect, but a drug that clears clinical trials has a reasonable exception of market acceptance. Financial institutions have audited statements and credit ratings and regulatory filings. Structural engineering has building codes and inspection processes. In each of those markets, there is something between the producer and the buyer that verifies quality claims before the money changes hands. Entertainment has nothing. There is no regulatory body that certifies a film's quality before release. There is no audited statement that tells the buyer whether a game was made well. There is no inspection process that validates a television series meets any quality standard before it airs. The buyer enters every purchase with no institutional protection whatsoever. The producer enters every release with no institutional validation. And this is not a gap waiting to be filled. Entertainment quality is genuinely uncertifiable by any institution because it is subjective, experiential, and context-dependent that in ways that pharmaceutical efficiency is not. There is no clinical trial for whether a film will make you feel something. There is no audit that tells you if a game is fun. The absence of certification is a permanent structure of the entertainment industry. There is no FDA for films. This is worth sitting with because we are so accustomed to the absence of quality certification in entertainment that we rarely notice how unusual it is. Rating systems, the MPAA, the ESRB, PEGI, certify content category, not quality. A film that can be rated G and be a masterpiece. An M-rated game can be unwatchable. The rating something tells you about content appropriateness and nothing about quality. It is not a quality signal. It was never designed to be a quality signal. Award bodies, the Oscars, the BAFTAs, the Game Awards, are retrospective, politically influenced, and commercially misaligned with buyer preferences. They tell you what was good last year, filtered through the preferences of a specific voting body whose tastes may or may not match yours, delivered 6 to 12 months after the product was available. As quality signals for current purchasing decisions, they are nearly useless. Critical consensus, Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, gets closest to functioning as a real-time quality signal, but is retrospective by definition, gameable by studios with review manipulation tactics, and arrives too late to affect opening weekend behavior. The buyer enters every purchase with no institutional protection. The producer enters every release with no institutional validation. This is the baseline condition of the entertainment market, and it makes every other problem worse. A director who made one great film, a defensive lineman who got a lot of sacks, has no guaranteed ability to make another great film or to translate at the NFL level. This is the problem that no amount of talent identification or development spending can solve. The inputs that generate quality entertainment, creative chemistry, timing, cultural resonance, execution under specific conditions, are non-codifiable. They cannot be written down, transferred, replicated, or systemized. I butchered that. Every great product is, to some degree, a specific combination of circumstances that cannot be reproduced on demand. This is why auteur theory, as a commercial proposition, is essentially useless. Even if a filmmaker is genuinely and consistently excellent, their excellence is not a guarantee. The list of great filmmakers who have made bad films is the same as the list of great filmmakers. The list of great game studios that have shipped disasters is the same as the list of great game studios. The audience cannot systematize quality production. Every product is effectively a prototype. Even sequels, the closest the industry gets to a proven formula, are prototypes because the conditions that made the original successful cannot be perfectly replicated. Studios do not greenlight films. They place bets. The entire production apparatus, the development process, the casting, the greenlight criteria, the marketing spend, is a system for managing variance in a zero guarantee environment, not a system for producing quality. A system for managing the risk that quality will not appear. The distinction matters. Managing variance and producing quality are different objectives, and they produce different decisions. Here is a condition that makes the entertainment industry risks calculus unlike almost any other industry. The producer absorbs all the cost before the buyer makes any decision. A major studio film costs $50 to $200 million to produce and another $25 to $100 million to market before a single ticket is sold. Every dollar of that $300 million, or $75 million, is spent on the basis of a prediction about buyer behavior that cannot be verified until the product is in the market. The buyer who eventually purchases a ticket risks $15. The producer who made the film risked $300 million. This asymmetry means that the producer and the buyer are playing fundamentally different games. The buyer's downside from a bad purchase is an inconvenient afternoon. The producer's downside from a bad release is punishment time. It's an existential event. Studios have gone under from single bad bets. No individual consumer has been bankrupted by a bad movie ticket. When the downside of failure is catastrophic and irreversible, risk elimination becomes a dominant production logic. Not quality maximization or creative ambition, risk elimination. This is the direct economic cause of franchise dependency. A sequel to a known IP does not guarantee success, but it reduces variance. This buyer already knows the IP. The quality signal already exists. The adverse selection problem is partially solved before the film is made. The expected outcome is lower than a potential breakout original, but the floor is higher. And when the floor matters more than the ceiling, you take the sequel. Sunk cost asymmetry in a zero guarantee environment is the direct economic cause of every behavior the sequel discourse attributes to creative cowardice. The studios are not necessarily cowards, they are producers operating in a market where the downside kills companies and the upside is uncertain, making rational decisions about risk under conditions that would make any rational actor cautious. Run the three conditions together and the market outputs become unsurprising. The sequel exists because adverse selection, the experience good problem operating in a zero guarantee market, makes original IP an information trap for the buyer. The buyer cannot evaluate quality before purchase. The sequel is Akerloft's solution to the Akerloft problem, generated spontaneously by market pressure. Starcasting exists for the same reason. When IP is unavailable, the actor's identity functions as a portable franchise. The buyer cannot evaluate the film before purchase, but they can evaluate their prior experience with this actor. Apologies. The star is a quality signal that travels across projects, amortizing the trust built in prior releases into new ones. Opening weekend dependency exists because demand collapses on bad word of mouth instantly, and the review system is retrospective. The revenue window is the window of buyer ignorance. The streaming volume strategy, flood the platform with content and let the buyer find what they want, was to remove the purchase decision entirely and to replace it with a subscription that gives access to everything. This attempt to solve adverse selection failed because volume without curation creates discovery problems that replicate the adverse selection dynamic in a different form. The reboots cycle exists because legacy IP is a discounted quality signal. Every one of these behaviors is a rational market response to the Unholy Trinity. The people making these decisions are not stupid. Or maybe they are. They are operating in a market structure that makes these decisions the path of least resistance for any rational actor managing significant capital at risk. It's not creatively bankrupt. It is structurally constrained. There is a difference. Creative bankruptcy is a moral condition. Structural constraint is an economic condition. It's a set of market incentives that make certain behaviors rational and other behaviors irrational, regardless of the intentions of the people involved. The Trinity produces the industry did not produce the Trinity. The sequel is not a symptom of cowardice, it is the market solving an information problem that the market itself created. Yes. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and a little quiz for y'all. Who was number 50? Who was the football player that I put on slide 2B? If you know that, I'll like and put a heart on your video, and I'll comment so you can ask any question you want. Bye, guys. See you guys next time. Peace out.